What are your concerns at this point? The other ethical question that has arisen is about costing. And of course, the government has in fact said the vaccines will be free for all. Many people approve of this approach because otherwise there's a sense that the vaccine that is paid for is better. I mean, there could be this imagined bias that the vaccine that is paid for is better than the vaccine that is available free. But there are also others who are saying that those who can afford should pay for it. What do you think?
Well, frankly, this is what is called a public good. When you're having an epidemic, it's not just the personal protection that an individual gets.
Yeah.
If a person does not get immunized and becomes infected, that person can then disseminate the virus to 5 people, 10 people, 20 people down the road. I mean, the cycle can actually involve many more. And we know that now 80 to 90% of the infections come from 10 to 20% of the people. So if you are a super spreader and do not get vaccinated, then you are actually a threat to society. So these negative externalities mean that it is actually a public good, and public financing must protect that public good. If people pay taxes properly, and if you have a proper progressive tax system, then the government should actually pay for all the vaccines to everybody. But if people want to jump the queue and then go and get it somewhere else from the private market, then that's up to them. But as far as possible, anybody who needs the vaccine and wants the vaccine must be given free of cost to the
Should,
government.
should, should, should the private sector, I mean, there are those like Kiran Shaw who, for example, have argued that when the COVID tests were being done only by the government sector, the pace of the test, the efficiency of the system was much slower. She's saying that the governments can cap the price, pricing if it so needs, but the private sector must be deployed in being able to administer the vaccine. What do you think?
I believe that firstly, the criteria of essentiality of function and vulnerability of the health state must be clearly met, and they must be prioritized. We cannot allow the vaccine to get into the private market at this point in time and dilute those priorities. You cannot divert the
So
vaccine.
you would be against the vaccine being allowed in the private sector right now?
Certainly, not
You don't buy the argument that the private sector would be faster, quicker, more efficient in administering it. What are the dangers of arming the private sector also in the way that the private sector was allowed to conduct the COVID tests?
No, if the private sector is going to be providing the vaccine according to the priority lists that the government has laid out on clear-cut criteria, which are public health criteria of essentiality of function as well as vulnerability of the health state, that's fine. But if you're going to start giving to people who do not meet those criteria, who jump the queue just because they can afford it, then you are actually diverting the available vaccine supply and not meeting the public health function and objectives. So you
So you're
have to
saying
make
you're saying till there is actually a surplus in terms of demand supply, the private sector cannot be allowed to get in this game. Not game, but in the
absolutely,
administering of the
absolutely,
vaccine. Yes?
absolutely. First, we have
And
to
and,
meet this criteria.
and how are we doing actually on the demand supply front?
Well, I think at the moment we have two vaccines and they will be able to ramp up their supply, but we must also recognize that AstraZeneca is a vaccine that has been borrowed from the West. It is an Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine that's been produced here as Covishield. So they
Yeah.
have their commitments to the international market also, and they also have
No, but they're not allowed to export this vaccine right now. The vaccines manufactured by the Serum Institute will not be allowed for export.
Sure, certainly. But at some point in time, they will. And secondly, they're also saying they expressed a desire that after giving a certain amount of supply to the government, they will also start entering into the private market in India. Therefore, you have to have the government should be able to say that these are the kind of supplies that we need for meeting these initial 300 million people. That is, the people who are both essential workers as well as the vulnerable sections of the population. After that, you can go and do what you want. So, or you raise your production faster. So it is definitely that the government must ensure that these two objective criteria are met. And in the meanwhile, if other vaccines make the grade, and there
Yeah.
are other vaccines also queuing up, your supply chain may actually expand.